Welcome to the NRT Now podcast, giving you the latest in Christian music news, topics, and artist interviews directly from the largest Christian music site online, newreleasetoday.com. Now, here's your host, Jake.
Welcome to episode 12, and we have a very special guest. All of you long-term NRTers will know her. We have Mary Nikkel co-hosting this episode. Did I say that right, Mary?
You did. You nailed it. First try. I'm impressed.
Sweet. I didn't screw up yet. We'll give it time. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing these days.
Yeah, so these days, one of the major things that I'm doing is I have a rock-focused website called Rock on Purpose. The URL is rockonpurpose.live, but we do a whole lot on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter as well, so you can find us all of those places. And really, it's just meant to focus on and kind of lift up purpose-driven rock and have some kind of unconventional conversations around it. We do a lot of really like long form content, a lot of people just sharing their stories and experiences with music. And I've been doing that for a little bit over a year now. And it's just been really incredible to see all of the different people who have gotten involved. And outside of that, I'm really invested in the Christian rock community as a whole. I do a lot of work as a freelance writer and photographer for different labels, artists, just kind of all over in that area. Christian rock is kind of what I've always been passionate about.
So we actually used one of your articles right at the beginning of the podcast. It was what happens if DC Talk gets back together. Oh, I'm forgetting that title. That was in June, I think, is when that one came out.
Yeah. We had a bunch of I've got about a dozen different contributors, and a bunch of them kind of chipped in and added their voices to that.
So since we're on the topic, and we've talked a lot about the Jesus Freak Cruise, so far on this podcast. Going back to when DC Talk really introduced Christian rock, I'd say they're almost the grandfather. No, I shouldn't say grandfather.
It's a fair quality though to say that they introduced Christian rock. I think that you can pretty well assign that to them.
Well, let's use the father of Christian rock, because I think if I said grandfather, they'd probably get mad at me.
That's fair also.
Yeah, they're not quite there yet. But in your mind, what do you think we've seen, from when DC Talk really, blew this wide open to what we're seeing today?
Yeah, so it's interesting to kind of mark how the career of DC Talk in a lot of ways was kind of foretold a lot of the direction that things would go, because with DC Talk, what you did see was an entirely new sound that they developed, and that became at first the church wasn't really sure about it, and then the church kind of slowly over time embraced it. And then with the Supernatural album, you had DC Talk starting to really get some crossover appeal as well. And I think that's really, Christian rock as a whole has mirrored that trajectory. When DC Talk was first making music, people really weren't sure if Christian rock was even a thing that could exist. They weren't sure if it was a contradiction of terms. But then over time, as kind of the passion became undeniable and the movement of the spirit that was happening through it, churches kind of got on board. And then you started to see Christian rock being this thing that started to reach even outside of churches. And I think that's the exact kind of pathway that has happened. And within that, there's been a lot of just room for people to diversify, the kind of breadth of sound that is now represented in Christian rock. Just so much experimentation, so much creativity. It's gone from being a fairly, post-grunge sound in the 90s to now you have Christian rock bands who are everything from kind of your indie coffee shop style soft rock to, metalcore. Some of the best metalcore acts that have ever existed have come out of the church. So that's been kind of, I think, the broad trajectory since DC Talk was first making music.
And I think we're seeing a lot of good stuff come out of, the Christian rock scene, and a lot of, big names or, names that we're all familiar with, like Seventh Day Slumber, are really not just continuing, but just digging in, taking root and investing further. We got Rockfest Records that I think it's Joseph Rojas.
Yes.
Is it Joseph? Okay. I knew it was Rojas, but I couldn't remember the first name, and forgive me, man. I I apologize. We're seeing a lot of awesome stuff come down that line.
Oh, absolutely. I work really closely with that team. I do a lot of writing for them. And I just cannot speak highly enough of the character and the passion that's involved. Because kind of what has happened is as like the Rojas family really, because Joseph's wife, Lori, is very, very invested in everything they do as well. They've really kind of been a center point for this reunification of Christian rock because kind of when the bottom fell out of the music industry after the digital era changed everything, there was a lot of scattering that happened. And, most rock bands got dropped from major labels and they were kind of all over the place on their own. And what the Rojas's have really done is been the catalyst for all of these bands to kind of come back together and be really united. And that's happened through things like the City Rock Fest tour, which has been going on for 6 years now and is, a massive all rock tour that goes all over the country. And it's also happening with Rockfest Records, which now has artists like Zana, they have Random Hero, they have The Protest. Just kind of, again, creating this space where now a lot of rock artists are really able to support each other. And that's been a really cool thing to see just in the past couple of years. Like, I feel like I'm seeing a revival like I never would have guessed could happen a few years ago. And it's just really, the people behind it are just amazing. The kind of passionate human beings who have invested themselves in this work.
From what I've seen from Facebook posts, just their reaction to incidents that have happened, and and just seeing who they are personally, and then also seeing their passion has been really awesome to see. For someone who's likes the music but not really invested in the scene as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the way they handled the bus incident. It's actually not too far from me, down the road here. Was that a year ago or so? And
oh, right.
Just the way they handle themselves, and then just how they're investing.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I tell people really often when they ask me what's kept me kind of working with Christian rock for so long, is because Christian rock got kind of shoved to the side of almost all of the industry conversations. People who are still making that kind of music, they have to be doing it because they love it, because there isn't really money in it. There really isn't like industry acclaim. It's incredibly difficult. And so those bands who have really stuck it out and who are here now making this kind of music, by and large, for the most part, they have to have a really, really good reason that's actually rooted in a sense of mission and calling. So that's been a really, really powerful thing to see and just like to kind of aspire to also, I feel like, as a person, just watch people live out their faith and their calling with that much intensity.
It seems like there's, really good scene, it's becoming more of a scene than it is, artists. Rock doesn't get a lot of radio airplay. That's dwindling down more and more, as Spotify and, Apple Music and all that, get bigger and bigger. The radio play goes, down further and further, it seems, and so it almost seems like there's been more of a sense of a community and more of a sense of a scene, in Christian rock these days, as opposed to just putting out music as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that because, like you were saying, the rock radio presence is less and less, and Billboard actually removed their Christian rock charts at the start of this year, I believe. They stopped publishing those entirely. So, like, Christian rock radio really doesn't exist. Mostly it's just people who have shows that are broadcast on stations and syndicated out. And so with this kind of gap, what's happened is all we have is each other. All of the artists who are in this, all of the radio show hosts who really have a passion for rock, those of us who are writing about it, all of us really are at a point where it's like, well, it's a very underdog kind of thing. It's like, we're going to band together to support each other because no one else is really going to do that. And what that creates is a sense of family that's really beautiful because it removes competition and it removes some of the like more difficult political parts of the music industry. It just like makes it so we really are focused on what matters.
And that's incredible. And like I said, I'm kind of an outsider looking in. I go to a few shows here and there, as they roll through, but like I said, as an outsider, it's, really awesome to see that happening.
Yeah, well, and it's good to hear that is kind of evident from the outside too. It's definitely like rock is not dead. We can confirm that the rumors are false. The rock is very much alive, and it's living for the things that actually matter.
With that, we've had a lot of awesome rock stuff happen in the last little bit. Disciple came out with their album, and I'm a longtime Disciple fan. And getting to meet Kevin Young, I want to say it was like February, March or so, was an awesome experience for me. Like I said, just having listened to them for so long and actually getting to meet him was pretty awesome. I'm not gonna lie. I think I held my fangirl in check. I think. He can confirm or deny that later. And so, I just finally, sorry to the Random Hero guys, just barely listened to their album like this week, kind of getting ready for this episode here. Oh my gosh, it's so good.
Yeah, they blew me away with that one.
Yeah. And I've met them before as well a couple of times. Actually, the couple of times was like within a couple months of each other in 2 different states. I went up to them. It was actually on a Red tour. I was like, "Hey guys, what's up?" And they looked at me funny, like, "Why do I know you? Like, this is weird." Because I just hung out with backstage and stuff at the music festival like a month earlier, I want to say.
Okay, yeah.
But hearing what they're coming out with is really awesome as well. So some really awesome stuff. What else do we need to be knowing about in the rock? Who else do we need to be listening to? Who else do we need to know about?
Yeah, well, I would totally agree that Disciples' Love Letter, Kill Shot, and Random Heroes Tension have been 2 really kind of like of the milestone albums of this year. But some of the ones that maybe have flown a little bit more under the radar, Wolves at the Gate released a record called Eclipse, which is more on the metalcore end of things. And that just blew me away. Wolves at the Gate is one of those bands that I feel like has been a little bit of a slow build, but they are just fantastic. What they're putting out is incredible. And then also kind of on the metalcore Solid State end of things, the Devil Wears Prada just released another record after it had been a little while, and they're kind of like an elder statesman of metalcore in this scene. But it is a phenomenal record, and I would even say that people who think that they don't like the Devil Wears Prada should listen to it and think again. Because it's really, really phenomenal. But then there's some other bands that are kind of newer, like Paradise Now is a new Tooth and Nail band that is out on the road with Disciple right now, actually. And their debut EP, Supernatural, is just mind-blowing. Like, we've needed a band like this in Christian rock for like a decade. I feel like I've been waiting for them, and they're finally here. And I just cannot recommend that EP enough. And you have Glasslands just released a new single. And they're another band who's kind of like a slightly newer face. Their debut full length released in 2016. I think we're going to get a new record in the next few months, and I'm ready. So those are kind of some of the other bands. This year has been so full of music. I feel like I could just list, like I could sit here for the next hour and list for you all of the fantastic records and singles that have come out this year. It is such a full year.
To take a little bit of a tangent here, I was, a huge Tooth and Nail fan, back in the early 2000s. I think, was it Reliant K that was on them? No, maybe it wasn't. But right when there was a lot of that kind of music coming out, what is Tooth and Nail up to these days for those of us who've kind of fallen off the wagon?
Yeah, so Tooth and Nail, they exist. There's Tooth and Nail, but then there's like 3 imprints under this umbrella, right? There's BEC Recordings, which is kind of more the worship and historically CCM pop side of things. Like BEC Recordings is kind of what Jeremy Camp came up through and things like that. And then there's Solid State, which is the really heavy end, which again, that's like Wolves at the Gate, Devil Wears Prada, what has been on there in the past, Silent Planet, who's another new and up and coming metalcore band. So you have kind of those 3 branches. Tooth and Nail proper has actually kind of been drifting more towards like your Mike Mains and the Branches, indie rock sound. But Tooth and Nail also, signed Disciple, and this new Disciple record is a Tooth and Nail record. Well, I think it's kind of like, depending on where you're distributing it, they've put it under the name BEC as well. But that's Disciple is, I would say, one of the flagship bands now on Tooth and Nail, which is a weird kind of convergence because historically that has never been true. This is the first. Demon Hunter is also still on the Tooth and Nail Solid State family, and Demon Hunter released a fantastic dual album earlier this year, War and Peace. So that's another flagship band for them. So they have a few of these kind of just really like veteran big names still. But then aside from that, they're kind of like exploring newer indie rock sounds. They have a new band called Kids that they just released a few singles from. They have a band called Loyals over the past couple of years who's released a EP, I think, and it was really fantastic. So they've kind of been branching out of the traditional lots of guitars sound into more of your indie rock world.
Yeah, and I'm noticing. I pulled up the artist list here. Like Tyson Mossenbacher. I didn't realize he was Tooth and Nail.
Oh yeah, again, that's the kind of sound they're going for now. And Tyson's fantastic, but very different from your classic Tooth and Nail sound.
Yeah, and when I did my initial search, I guess I remembered like TFK and it has MXPX listed under Tooth and Nail, Under Oath and Berlin. That's a lot more of what I remembered, from Tooth and Nail. So it's interesting to see that change, that whole shift there.
Yeah, Tooth and Nail is really like, I've, just so much respect for the way that they shaped our genre, because they really were, I feel like 10 years ago, all my favorite bands were Tooth and Nail bands. That they were really kind of the bands that soundtracked my coming of age. And now I feel like they're reaching a good balance of having still some of the really heavy bands. Like, again, some of the bands on Solid State are the best bands in metalcore, like hands down. I 100% believe that. But then you also have these newer indie artists, like indie in sound, who are coming onto the label. So they're really diversifying. And then you also have, there's still quite a bit of worship on their BEC imprint that's being released also. So they're really everywhere right now. They were traditionally known as a pure rock label, and now they've kind of got their hands in just about every genre.
Yeah. Let's shift a little bit to kind of the big dog in, Christian rock, tiny band called Skillet. They released a huge album this year. Victorious, I think is the name of it. Sorry.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, that one was a huge album that came out this year, not too long ago.
Yeah, that was just in August. And it feels almost like I had heard it prior to that, so I've been living with it for a little longer. But anytime in a year that Skillet releases a record, I think it pretty well goes without saying that it's going to be like the biggest Christian rock record of the year. They really have kind of, I say dominated the scene, but I say that in a way that it's a really positive thing, because they've also worked so hard to lift up other bands with them. But they are the kings of Christian rock, kings and queens right now. And it's a fantastic record. Like, they just keep delivering on what their fans want.
And it's great, and it's crazy. Earlier this year, like everybody was talking that, they may be done. They may be breaking up. Ledger was on Winter Jam. We had Fight the Fury. We had a lot of stuff going on that wasn't Skillet, that involved, the Skillet members. And so everybody was talking that, is Skillet done? Have they reached the end? Have they, has the course ran out? And, then they come out with this.
Yeah, I think it's just that people, underestimate the insane just volume of creativity and passion that these human beings are capable of putting out there. It's like they can not only kill it with one band, they can kill it with three and then drop a graphic novel in there for good measure. Like, it's just crazy. There's no other band who is just putting out this much material into the world right now.
And, a little bit of a spoiler alert, that is a topic of conversation that we'll hear from John, in just a little bit here. And then, they're out on the road right now with Dirty Honey and Alter Bridge, which, Alter Bridge has Mark Tremonti that, when I started playing guitar when I was, in my teen years, that I was learning to play Creed songs, so they're on tour co-headlining with, a band that has that much of a draw. I mean, it's just incredible to see what they're doing and how they're crossing over.
Oh, yeah, and it's been wild, I think, to watch because those of us who listened to Skillet when we were teenagers and they were, kind of our little band, playing in churches, and now you see them selling out arenas around the world with these huge, huge names, and it's crazy, but it's awesome to see.
I think the crossover, playing with mainstream artists, kind of that crossover audience, it's I think it's relatively new, to the Christian rock scene. I say relatively. I know it's been happening for a while, and I've seen it not done well. I've seen it done amazing. And one of the things that I love from Skillet is they were on tour with Sick Puppies, and I think John was saying Devour the Day was that tour, but it's undeniable who they are. It doesn't matter if there's profanity in the acts before them, like it's just undeniable who they are.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't think that there has been any other band who that holds as true for in as wide a variety of settings. Because I saw Skillet on their Seven Dust tour earlier this year, and they performed and presented themselves and talked about Jesus in the exact same way that they would when they're headlining Winter Jam. I've seen them close to 30 times, I think, over the past 11 years, and I've seen them in so many different settings, and they are the exact same people in every single setting. And that level of integrity is just incredible and very, very rare.
Like I said, I've seen it, kind of go both ways. Would you say that kind of Skillet's kind of that gold standard? Yeah, we'll use gold standard, and just kind of how that needs to be done. Yeah, and just is that a good template that we should be seeing used throughout kind of these crossover events?
I definitely think that they are serving as a role model for the bands that come after them because they were one of the first who has really done, I mean, and they have done it to a bigger extent than anybody else, certainly. There have been other bands who have maybe came slightly before or who have been alongside them, but I think they have had the most success doing this. And I think that the integrity that they've displayed is absolutely kind of a standard that should be set for other bands that kind of are coming behind them or looking to do the same thing and want to do it with grace. Obviously, every band is called to be slightly different. Like, no one else is called to be quite like Skillet. So some people, the way they present themselves in different settings, like it will need to be true to who they are, obviously. But at the same time, I think Skillet is a really, really great kind of benchmark to say, okay, it is possible to really be true to who you are and what you believe, no matter where you're going. And it is possible to do that in a way that invites people from every walk of life to show up to the hope that your music is offering.
And this is something I didn't really get to touch on with John just because, we ran out of time and I actually went a little over time. But, back when I think it was Awaken Alive came out, they really just started branching out. Their music was starting to catch some mainstream attention, some ESPN, and they were starting to kind of branch out that way. I think at the same time, Christian music had a little bit of a sellout culture where, like, if you didn't talk about Jesus or, if you didn't do just Christian shows or, whatever, you almost were kind of a sellout, and I think POD, at least from what I knew at the time, I think POD kind of started a little bit of that trend when they kind of branched out, and I don't even remember that full story, to be honest. But I think we kind of had this sellout culture where if you didn't walk and talk as a Christian artist through and through that you were a sellout, and I unfortunately kind of fell into that a little bit. I didn't get it at the time, but now I get it. I see what they're doing and I see who they are and their message, and I get what they're doing, and it's definitely not sellout. And I think that sellout culture is starting to fade away, a little bit more as, the genre as Christian rock continues to grow.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think that, like, I appreciate your sharing kind of your personal process with that too, because I think a lot of people were in that boat where they just didn't really understand what was happening when artists first started doing this. And there was some level of fear that maybe it was not good what was happening or it was being done for the wrong reasons. But I do think that as more and more bands like Skillet or like POD or like Switchfoot have done this crossing over thing with a lot of integrity and a lot of love and a lot of grace and being absolutely centered on what they believe, I think more and more people are starting to understand, maybe it is that we can go into these spaces that don't look like the church at all and bring kind of the person of Christ with us. And maybe what happens then is powerful in its own right, just as much as a worship service, because God is being honored by it and he's being brought into a place or represented in a space where maybe he isn't often represented. And I think in a way that's a very, very Christ-like thing to do, where you incarnate the character of Christ in every space where people have historically said is unholy. Like, I think that's the most Christ-like thing of all in a way. So it's something that I think Skillet's done well, and it's something that I'm very, very passionate about supporting as well.
Yeah, and I love to see it, and at the show that I went to, here in Dallas, with Alter Bridge and Dirty Honey and stuff, like, it was just undeniable who they were. And the opening artists were, Alter Bridge was actually co-headlining that tour, but I mean, not that they were necessarily, profanity ridden, and, awful artists or anything like that, but, you could definitely see the difference between the two bands and, who the three bands. You could definitely see who was who and, what Skillet really stood for.
Absolutely. And that is the great thing, is there's never any question. Like, there's never any question what they stand for. And at the same time, they've managed to do it in such a way where they still say, we are going to be present with and befriend people who believe things that are different. And that balance is a very hard balance to strike. And they've done it very, very well, I feel.
Very well. Well, before we, get to my conversation with John, one of the things I wanted to do here is just to give a quick shout out to, all the tour managers and, Kyle in this particular instance, with the Skillet's tour manager, and, they do a lot of hard work, in making sure that we're able to get these interviews, that they're done, on time, that the artists are available, and, all the media people that we come in contact with to get, a lot of this stuff arranged. It's no small feat. And so, I just want to give, kind of everybody a shout out. I mean, we gave Kyle a little bit of grief towards the end of this, and, I want to balance that out on this other side. But I mean, so when you guys are listening to these interviews, the conversations that we get to have with the artists, I mean, there's a lot that goes in behind that. And I think, Mary, you can attest to that as well.
Oh, absolutely. We have some unbelievable, incredible people working behind the scenes who most people never hear about, but they are fantastic people.
Yep. Tour managers, we got press contacts, we got media groups, we've got a lot of people that are involved in this process that are just fantastic.
Absolutely agree.
So I definitely want to give them a shout out while I get the chance, and, Kyle, to balance out the little bit of grief we gave you at the end of this conversation. So, I titled this episode Outbearded, and I'm sure that some of the people that were looking at this episode title are like, what the heck is this all about? So, let's find out. We'll find that out here in just a second. Mary, thanks so much for helping me out with this episode. And this was awesome to hear a little bit more about the rock scene.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me and letting me speak into this a little bit. I love the NRT family. Just so grateful for everything you guys are doing.
And we love what you're doing over at Rock on Purpose as well. And, if you haven't subscribed to or followed or whatever the social media things are for Rock on Purpose, make sure you guys do that. And let's find out why we titled this episode Outbearded. I am here getting completely outbearded by the one and only John Cooper.
I've never heard of that term, outbearded.
Well, this is like before and after picture of something, I'm sure, like a beard care clinic or something.
We're here with John Cooper on Outbearded. It sounds like a great TV show.
I think we need to make with that.
I think we should, man.
That should be a Cooper podcast episode.
I think it should be.
So you do have beard oils, for
I
those,
actually do have beard oils.
although I don't think that'll help this, but
I might. I don't know.
it might.
No, it helps anybody. It makes it soft and it makes it smell good. Yeah, all natural. Oh, natural.
natural.
That's right.
So you've been dabbling in quite a bit of stuff lately. You got a book. I just picked up my copy, shamefully, just a few minutes ago here.
Yes.
The graphic novel. I'm sorry. It's not a book. It's a graphic novel.
I'm with you, brother.
So you got that, and you've done Fight the Fury. Jen has Ledger, her solo project. You guys have been kind of branching out a little bit, doing some stuff that's kind of off the beaten path for you guys. So how does that kind of tie back into Skillet? I think that when you've been doing something for so long, kind of branching out and kind of refreshing, kind of pursuing something else, just kind of gives a little bit of a reset. Can you talk a little bit about that? And
Sure. I mean, there is a lot going on. I think that it's been kind of cool. It kind of created this like super creative space. It was, even though there was a lot of different outlets for that creativity. And rather than I used to think that maybe if you dabbled in too many things, that you're not kind of like, keeping the main thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, if I'm busy with this, I can't really focus on my Skillet music or what have you. But I think a funny thing happened when it just felt like creative soup and everything was fun and exciting and like, hey, why don't we try this? And the graphic novel was the same way. It was kind of, it's not that much different writing a story than writing a song, really. You're trying to get a theme across and you're trying to emotionally connect with people with a narrative, which is kind of the same thing. So it's fun.
a little bit longer than a song.
Definitely does. It takes longer to read it, yeah.
So what have you taken away from the book or the graphic novel? I'll get this right.
You call it whatever you like.
From Fight the Fury, Jen, what have you guys brought through that whole process into now victorious and going forward?
I think that we just had a lot of confidence in making the record because we had been doing so many other things, and it's kind of like you get through the first hump of the race, and then the next one's a little bit more difficult. And so I think writing on the Ledger project, Corey, my wife Corey, wrote more than I did, but I did write a little bit on a couple songs and Warrior and helped out writing for those. And then Corey produced the bulk of Jen's record. I think it just kind of gave us a little bit more confidence to keep doing what we were doing. And for me, it was going, you know what? Whatever comes my way, I can handle it because there's doors that God is opening. I'm not going to be afraid of those challenges, even though it feels like a lot. So within about a 2-year period, we wrote and recorded the Ledger project, wrote and recorded Fight the Fury project, wrote and released Eden, wrote and recorded the Skillet project. That was all in about 2.5 years, so it was really busy.
So you guys weren't just relaxing and just hanging out?
We were not relaxing, and we were touring. So I tell people, I go, we did all of that, and we also played in, I think, 32 countries over the time.
That's incredible. That's incredible. So you also had Corey's cupcakes in the middle of all that.
Yeah, that was really funny.
Oh my gosh. Kevin gave me a preview of that, and I told him that was the one. That was the one. Like,
it was actually
I almost
good.
Believed it.
And there was so much research done into it that it felt legit.
Yeah.
Like, this actually could be cool. And I like that they used a K for the cupcake.
Yeah, and all the cupcakes were Skillet song themed, and I told him that was the one. That was absolutely the one.
That was funny.
So one of the other things that I've seen that you've been doing lately is just posting and just kind of being a little bit more vocal about what's happening. Started with the post about, I can't remember the Hillsong guy's name.
Just about what's happening with Christian leaders and leaving the faith, etc.
Joshua Harris. I finally remembered that. That was a topic of conversation yesterday. I couldn't remember the name. Now I remember it. So since you've rehashed that over and over again, let's do it again.
Sure.
I'm kidding. Actually, the power of what you're doing here is incredible. I've actually used that as devotional. Andrew and I, my buddy here and I, are part of a group that's called Medium Rare in Prayer. It's an amazing group.
Awesome.
Grill steak, pray for each other, great things.
Fantastic.
Manly stuff.
I love it, yeah.
So we went over that first post that you did, and I mean, it came into a very great time of discussion. So, and then you've continued that down the line. I remember there's a post talking about friendship, and you don't always have to agree with everybody to be respectful, and to to love somebody as well. I think there was one on purity. There's one on bringing your Bible to school. And then, the recent one, which we'll talk about here in just a second. And so was this something that was kind of bubbling under the surface and that just kind of kicked it over the top? Or is that something that just is a response and it kind of grew?
For the last few years, I say 5, I've been wondering, like, how can I get more vocal? How can I help, especially young people, in their walk with Christ? Because the culture is getting exceedingly more confusing by the day.
Absolutely.
And I think that a lot of Christians are confused, and I can understand why. I think a lot of people my age, a lot of which are parents, are looking at culture going, like, scratching their head, like, I just don't know where to start. And I've been doing quite a lot of research on the last 5 or 6 years. I've read 200 books, I bet, on various things, trying to put together what has happened in culture that is leading us to be so confused. And so I wanted to do something. I didn't know what. I started doing a podcast last year that I was like, maybe I'll try to delve into it without seeming too preachy, and just didn't know what to do. When Joshua Harris, his thing came out, I read it, and my wife was like, you need to write something about this. And I was like, I don't, nobody wants to hear this from me. I don't want to. Nobody cares. And then, another person came out. I was like, you know what? My wife again, actually. Corey was like, you need to write something. And I was like, I don't know if I will. Nobody's going to care. And I almost didn't post it. I wrote it. I spent several hours getting it right. And then I'm like, I'm not even going to post this because nobody cares what I have to say about it. I'm a nobody. And an amazing thing happened. I think it was just a matter of everybody saw what I wrote, and everybody, like the silent majority of the church in America, was like, yeah, that's what we think too. That's what we're all thinking. Maybe didn't know how to say it. Maybe didn't have a voice to say a platform. But I think the fact that it was coming not from a preacher, an established, traditional church person, maybe gave it a little bit more, made it more poignant perhaps. But that's what that's all about. I do plan to do more. And a lot of it's because I'm just like, man, I feel like these answers are really clear. I just don't think the church is always doing the best job of understanding culture. I almost feel like in our unique time that it would be good for instance, a church leadership is made up of a lot of different kinds of gifts, right? Some people are really great pastors, meaning they take care of people and they shepherd. Maybe the pastor's not always the best preacher. Some churches have 2 guys, or one of them pastors and one of them teaches. There's lots of different ways that you have gifts. One of the gifts that I think we almost need now is someone who really understands what's happening in culture, because you have social media culture that is its own animal. And I don't mean that means that this person is necessarily even employed by the church or he's a preacher, but somebody to look into things and go, here's the trend of what's happening. Here's what young people are being taught. And a lot of the things are being, a lot of the issues of the day are being framed in a way that is really not accurate and not intellectual. One of those things being, you just mentioned, friendship. One of the things you're constantly hearing in culture right now is you have to accept everybody. And I go, oh, I do accept everybody. Well, no, you don't, because you said that Christians shouldn't A, B, or C. And I'm like, oh, no, I accept them. I just don't endorse what they're doing. And true friendship tells people what you think. I can't believe we live in a time when you're not allowed to disagree with someone else's choices. So it's their business, but I can still have my own opinion.
Yeah. So I can be your friend, but not agree with everything that you agree with.
Of course.
Or, agree with the lifestyle that you're leaving, but I'd still love to go have coffee, or since this is a Christian podcast,
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. I don't understand how we got to a place where we can't do that. And so, I think that's really important for Christians to understand that all of the ways that we answer these really confusing questions need to be from the Word of God. It can't be like a mixture of Bible and psychology and Taylor Swift's tweets and whatever. It has to be answered from the Word of God. Otherwise, we've got no hope, and it'll just keep changing. All the rules will keep changing,
and it changes day by day.
Oh yeah, absolutely, day by day, and that of course is why at the advent of postmodernism and the rise of postmodernism in the 60s, that all of the really old religious conservative people were going, this is going to end absolute truth. And everybody made it sound like they were crazy people. And now we are actually seeing the end of absolute truth. So if there's no absolute truth, then there's no absolute morality. And then there's no rules. And so whatever is popular today, there'll be something different tomorrow. And there's no way to keep up with these rules. So it's actually not Christian. It's actually not a viable way for a civil society to keep functioning, because there's no way for anybody to win.
Who knows what's right today? What can I say today or not?
Yeah, it'll keep changing.
And so there's one, I think it was Thursday or Friday, pretty recently here, that there's a CNN article saying, why isn't Christian artists talking about, bashing Trump?
Right.
Which, agree, disagree, somewhere down the middle,
Sure.
It's very one-sided. And the thing that I think you brought out, going back to what you're saying earlier, who you don't have a voice or you're kind of afraid to say it. A lot of that is what I was thinking, obviously from a unique perspective, because I'm not on the road, CCM or I just interview artists, not get up on stage.
Right.
But, a lot of that is what I was agreeing with. I love the bit in the middle where it's like, Christian artists talk about love, and something more than politics. Mm-hmm. But yet for some reason, it's bad that they're not doing what I want them to do. This is my agenda.
I thought that was really bizarre, actually. And to me, I just didn't think it was good faith. I did not think it was a good faith take on it. It made it sound like the only people that have escaped scrutiny are Christian artists. And I'm like, I don't think that's really true. I haven't seen anybody say anything about secular rock artists not standing up against Trump or speaking out about this or the other. I just thought it was not good faith. And my point, and I think what I wrote was, I hope, apolitical. I wasn't saying, because everybody loves Trump. I don't think that's true. I think there's plenty of people in the CCM world that probably can't stand Trump. That's got to be the case, I would assume, because we're all different, right? But my point is that this has nothing to do with politics. There's lots of great reasons why we wouldn't do that. And I think in Christianity, we tend to argue the point, the policy, rather than against the person. So in other words, I don't want to attack any particular president, no matter who it is, them, but I don't mind attacking a policy that I don't like. It's something that I think is wrong, and I think Christian artists do that. So I kind of thought it was not really fair, and when it kind of painted an idea that there's a possibility that Christian artists are not aware of racism. That's kind of how I thought that the article came off, and that made me mad because that's not true.
Absolutely not true.
We know, and the kingdom of God is not America.
No.
The kingdom of God is, you know what I mean? The kingdom of God is something completely different than America. Christians should know that. I think we do. Yeah. And I think Christian artists speak about that all the time. I just think we tend to do it in a way that is a little bit more positive rather than negative. And I think that's fair.
Yeah. And we're running a little bit out of time. So before, Kyle gives us too much grief, just want to talk, you do that. You're posting, you're very outspoken about your faith, and you're on a very obviously not Christian tour. Not saying that Alter Bridge is, inherently bad or anything, but, not Christian. One of the things that one of my favorite Skillet moments was you were in Houston. You were with Sick Puppies, and I can't remember the rest of that.
Devour the Day, probably.
Probably. That was the year I stalked you, so I don't remember where that was in. I think that was, we hit, 4 shows that year of Skillet? Somewhere in there.
Yeah, at least 3.
It was at least 3. So one of the favorite things that from that tour was you said, hey, we're Christian. That's who we are. But I don't care if you're Jewish. I don't care if you're Buddhist. I don't care if you're Muslim. We atheists, we love you. And I can't say it in the good, true Cooper voice, from stage. So I did that complete disservice. But that was one of my favorite moments. Like, I don't care who you are. Like, we love you.
Yeah.
And so, how, with what you're posting now, how have you taken that to the tour, and to these audiences that are not inherently Christian?
Yeah, an amazing thing has happened so far in which there seemed to be somehow almost a complete division. I don't know, division sounds negative. Separation between what I am doing personally. And so, for instance, when I wrote the post on Christianity, which kind of went viral, I never thought it would, but it went out in a big way. Yeah. But nobody I was on tour with even knew I posted it. I think it's just like a separate world that they don't really know anything about or care about, which is cool with me. So I think that so far it's gone pretty well. And I think because most of the time when I'm really criticizing something, I'm typically kind of criticizing ourselves, meaning within the family, within the Christian family, saying we need to do a better job of this. But I'm always clear, if you're not a follower of Jesus, then this just doesn't pertain to you. So it's almost kind of like the way that you would be harder on your own kids than you would someone else's kid. You can go to bed anytime you want to, but my kid's got to be in bed by 10, that kind of feeling. And I think that our fans have kind of appreciated that I'm willing to be outspoken about things that I believe, but I don't think that I am, I'm not rude to anyone else about what they think. But honest enough to be upfront about saying, hey, there's nothing wrong with being exclusive. Everybody's religion is exclusive. There's nothing wrong with that. But we all live in a civil society together, and we appreciate one another's views and love them. But it doesn't mean we have to be embarrassed about our faith. If I was hanging out with a Jewish person or a Muslim person, I would never be like, they're exclusive and don't let me into their, whatever. I would never be that way. So I think that fans have kind of gotten it so far. But what I am surprised about, to be honest, shocked at the amount of Christian people that are all feeling the same way. I think that everybody feels a little shell-shocked of what's happened in the last 5 to 8 years. And I think
absolutely.
I think a lot of Christian people are going, oh, maybe we haven't done the best job of preaching truth. And maybe we need to. I think a lot of churches in really good faith were trying to be more open to reach the lost. Yeah. And in that search for openness, probably have not been clear enough about Jesus' stance on holiness and the Word of God being true. So we kind of created a whole bunch of very strange offshoots that are actually idolatry, but people don't know they're idolatry. Oh, no, I'm totally into Jesus. I don't think the Bible's real, but I think that Jesus is great, and I'm still a believer. You're like...
it's an ideology, not the faith in Jesus.
That is not faith in Christ. Yeah. That's, you've created a new God. And that's your prerogative to do, but that's not actually Christianity. So, I think that being clear about it would be a really helpful thing. I think a lot of Christians are feeling that way now.
Awesome. Well, we're a little over time here. Kyle's giving us dirty looks. Sorry, Kyle.
I'm giving Kyle a dirty look back in my mind.
Actually, Kyle's awesome. He's not giving us a dirty look yet. But so I saved the most important question for last.
Yeah.
We've had an awesome year in movies. We've had Avengers Endgame. We have Star Wars coming up. Yeah. Who the heck is Rey? Where does Rey fit into this whole thing?
In Star Wars?
Yeah, Star Wars that's coming up.
I really don't know. I mean, I like Star Wars. Well, I love the original Star Wars. Yeah. I'm still a fan of the whole thing, but I'm not fanboy of the new films enough to know any of this stuff. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I still like it. I'll still be there. I'm in. But it's almost, to me, a little bit like a new series. I'm like, oh, that's cool. It's not the original, but that's okay.
Not the one you're invested in.
Yeah. It can't compare to what Marvel's done, in my opinion. No. It just can't. Endgame is the new Empire. Empire Strikes Back, in my opinion. Yeah.
I mean, I tried to marry the fandoms. It didn't work.
Well, I think they're both excellent fandoms to be a part of, in my opinion. But I don't have any answers for you on Rey. I don't know that much about it.
We'll have to find out together.
I'll be there, though. I'll be there.
All right, thanks so much, John.
All right.